boys here. Okay, welcome everyone to tonight's Business Growth and Community Committee meeting for Monday the 1st of June 2026, the first day of winter, and wouldn't you know about that? Okay, we'll start with the BGC one, which is the opening affirmation and acknowledgement of country. Thank you. Councillor Bukowski.
We gather to represent the people of Albury who have entrusted us with this task. May our efforts be blessed with insight, wisdom and common sense. May our personal values give us honesty and courage to serve our community effectively and with respect for all.
Thank you. Acknowledgement of country, Councillor Bullivant.
Thank you, Mac. We'd like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as traditional custodians of the land that we meet upon today and pay our respects to the elders, past and present and future, for they hold the memories, culture, tradition and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people that can contribute to our community.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Should we use this one for that one? Yes.
Okay, we've got recording and webcasting a meeting. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed in accordance with Council's Code of Meeting Practice and will be made publicly available on Albury City's website. Attendance at this meeting is taken as consent to being recorded and included in the live stream. Any person who does not consent to being recorded may choose to leave the meeting. Members of the public are reminded to refrain from making defamatory statements or disclosing personal information. Noting that Albury City is not responsible for comments made by individuals. Recordings and live streams are protected by copyright and remain the property of Albury City. No part of the meeting may be copied, recorded, reproduced or transmitted without the prior written consent of the Chief Executive Officer. Conflict of interest declarations. I've received none. Mr. McGrath.
None received, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We're up to 4.1 apologies. We have an apology for the meeting, I believe. Councillor Hudson is an apology. Is that up on the screen? Are we aware of that? Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Councillor King.
I move that council receive note and accept the apology of Councillor Hudson and grant leave of absence for the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Second, Mayor Mac.
Thank you. Happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, we have no attendance by councillors at meeting by audio visual link. We're up to the minutes of the Business Growth and Community meeting held on the 7th of April 2026. Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you, Mayor Mac. I'd like to move the recommendation that the minutes of the Business Growth and Community Committee meeting be held, which was held on the 7th of April 2026 at 6 a.m. be confirmed. Thank you.
Councillor Bukowski.
Yeah, happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Callaghan, do you wish to speak to that at all?
No, thank you.
Okay, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? Motion is carried. Okay, we have no question. Oh, we have a questions on notice. That's right. How could I forget that? I asked the question, and that's there in the papers for notarization, and that'll be okay. BGC 8 notice of motions or rescission. There are none. BGC 9 presentation deputations. If required, do we need to move into committee of the whole, councillors? Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. I move the recommendation, I move that the committee move into the committee of the whole to enable questions and clarifications of subsequent agenda items.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Second that.
Thank you. Happy to put that. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Okay, we've got the BGC 9.1 rationalisation of strategies and plans update. Ms. Squire, I believe.
Thank you, Mayor Mac. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome my colleague, Pip, who is with me today, and we're going to give you a bit of an update around the work we've been doing around rationalising Albury City's strategies and plans. We might move to our presentation, please. Thank you. Okay. All right, so the purpose today is to provide Council with an update on our project progress of rationalising Council's strategies and plans. To give you a background, over the last 18 months, We've undertaken considerable work to consolidate and rationalise our corporate documents, including strategies, plans, master plans and frameworks. The importance of this work was further emphasised as part of the findings of the Davidson report undertaken in 2025.
Ms. Squire, could you talk more into the mic so people on live stream can hear? Thank you.
Apologies, thank you. One of the really important shifts for us throughout this work is now that financial sustainability is front and centre of how we think about our strategies. It's no longer enough for a strategy to be well-intentioned or something we'd like to do. It has to clearly align back to our community strategic plan, to Council's priorities, and importantly, what we can actually afford and deliver with the resources that we have. What this approach does is to make sure that everything we're progressing is purposeful, coordinated and deliverable. It strengthens the connection between our plans, particularly our community strategic plan and our budget, and it gives us the confidence that the initiatives we're committing to, including those that support inclusion, connection and community wellbeing, are not just aspirational, but are sustainable over the long term. A working group has been established to replace, and it is in place to redefine how strategy is identified, classified, developed, monitored and evaluated. The integrated planning and resourcing and reporting framework shows that none of our strategies and plans sit in isolation. They're all intended to be connected and to work together. At the top, the community strategic plan, along with our resourcing strategy, sets the direction for our city and everything we do. Every strategy, every plan, every initiative should clearly align back to these priorities. The rationalisation work is about bringing the discipline back in and making sure our strategies are directly supporting the delivery of our CSP, our Community Strategic Plan, and importantly, aligned to what we can realistically deliver within our budget and our workforce. In doing this, we're reducing duplication, improving clarity, and ensuring that what we're prioritising as an organisation is both purposeful and financially sustainable. I'll hand over to my colleague, Pip.
Good evening, all. So I'm just going to go through some of the actual detail of the mapping and where we've got to currently. So our mapping over the last 6 to 8 months that the Working Party has been convening, we've explored a number of mapping approaches before settling on the categories that we've got up there, which is a community-facing external mapping and an internal corporate mapping. So this makes it easier for both our external and our internal views. So the external facing map is focused on the core documents that support the delivery of our community strategic plan towards Albury 2050. And the internal map aligns to the documents within our corporate strategy, Our Future, and it also represents the delivery of our corporate success pillars, including the documents that guide our day-to-day work to ensure our compliance and best practice. So further mapping, so a draft of the community strategic documents map was also provided as part of an attachment to this presentation. So the map presents the strategic documents that are key in supporting delivery of the community's main priorities as outlined in the Community Strategic Plan. So we have mapped them into 3 areas. So core, these are predominantly legislated and are overarching. They define Council's direction and obligations, and they're a core part of the planning framework. Our leading documents shape how we respond to citywide priorities, growth and opportunities, and drive our long-term vision. Our enabling documents are more place or topic specific, and they support delivery, often providing the systems, tools and processes that ensure consistency and coordination across the organisation. This slide provides a snapshot of the reconciliation to date. The group started with a base list of 126 documents, and this table presents where we are currently. And just to reiterate, it's not stopping here. This process will continue. A decision was made, as you can see on column row 4, to not include the one-page site-specific master plans in the community-facing document. This does not diminish their importance of these documents, but it will still enable our community to view them on the website for transparency and ease of access. The following 3 slides are really just a representation of the attachment that was provided. The strategic documents map will be maintained to reflect our current endorsed documents and provide both the community and our people with a clear visual of our main priorities and deliverables. I won't go into detail of each slide, as you have got this in the attachment that was provided, unless there was any questions. So the internal mapping provides a representation of the strategies, our internal key documents that align against our corporate success pillars. You will notice that the success pillar enhanced environment is not shown here. This does not diminish its importance, rather it reflects how the mapping has been structured. Currently, there is no leading internal strategy as the key documents in this space are externally focused. However, the Community Strategic Plan sets out Albury City's carbon emission targets with a comprehensive report on our performance in reducing carbon emissions presented in the June year-end corporate success pillar results report. This table provides a breakdown of consolidation opportunities and provides a list of documents that have been retired or completed. You'll also see that there's a box there on the far right of 24 documents that I haven't listed. These were predominantly documents that were included in a previous strategic register where they've either been superseded, they were very much a team operational document, or retired. So we have not included those, but I do have a list if anyone wanted to know what those ones were. Thank you.
And next steps for this work. This slide really outlines the next phase of the work that we're undertaking, which is really about embedding an ongoing and disciplined approach to how we manage strategies across the organisation. Our strategic documents will continue to be reviewed to ensure they remain aligned with our current priorities, support the delivery of our community strategic plan, and are consistent with our financial sustainability program. There'll be strong oversight from our executive and service leaders, supported by a transparent approval process for any new or revised strategies to ensure alignment with budget and service planning and to minimise the risk of misalignment. A further report will be brought back to Council seeking endorsement for this work as it progresses. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Councillor Callaghan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Mac, through to the most relevant staff member. I just have a question in regards to some of the strategies that are actually currently in the budget. Will they be looked at for realignment as well? If, you know, it says up there, the process will continue. And what comes to my mind here is the Young Street review. It's currently in our budget for 150,000. I don't know if it really aligns with where we're going. We've already spent 250,000. That's an example. Are we looking at consolidating some of the ones that are already existing in the budget moving forward?
Ms. Squire.
I'll talk more generically
Yeah.
at the moment and not specifically to Young Street, but I think the review process that we're undertaking is that everything is under review. So as part, you know, obviously part of the work that's been happening as part of the review of the 4-year delivery program, but also other strategies and work, this is part of the work that we're doing, is undertaking a systematic approach to looking at all the pieces of work that we have. And that's to outline our general approach
Yeah.
rather than specifics about specific
Yeah.
programs or strategies as such.
Excellent. Thank you. And a follow-up question, if I may.
Yeah.
Where we have strategies, and I'll use an example if that's okay, but it could apply to any other ones as well, where a move is the example I'll use, just because there is a substantial amount in the order of about 515,000 for external consultation. Where we have the capacity or the resources, can we be looking at bringing those back in-house where possible?
Again, I'd probably talk on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Again, I probably need to talk more generically rather than specifically. I think that, again, if we come back to alignment with our community strategic plan, council priorities, and also our resourcing, that would happen on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
I think that's probably a fair thing to say.
Yep. Councillor King.
To the most relevant member of staff, and it may not be you, but in my experience, it seems most things can loosely be tied to the community strategic plan. Have we ever come across something that wouldn't align to our community strategic plan? It just sort of seems that, not just in Albury, but I see it in other areas as well, that, you know, if there's a thread of something that links to it, it seems to be yes, it clicks with that. I don't know if there's any observations to share in relation to alignment with that. Everything seems like it can align to it some way.
Mr. McGrath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor King, you're probably very right, you know, that there's often opportunities to draw a long bow and link things quite clearly to a community strategic plan. But I guess the lens that's being put on here that Sally and Pip have explained is it's about making sure that there is general alignment with the community strategic plan. But the critical thing is that it's resourced. It's able to be resourced in a sustainable way. Over many, many years, I've seen in various organisations where there's strategic documents that look great, they're impressive, but no real thought's been given to how you're going to implement or resource it. And sometimes they are quite expensive to resource. So I guess that one of the things that we've talked about at Executive is the need to make sure that anything we do in preparing strategies and plans, that it has a section dedicated to the resourcing implications and how it will fit into the current operating plan and delivery program. If it can't be, then it's questionable as to whether it should even be presented to council. And that sounds, you know, a little bit rough to take that approach. But the reality is, if you can't deliver it, you don't want to set an expectation within the community. That's why it's so important to make sure that there is close alignment to the CSP and that you've got the resourcing capability to do so as well.
Thank you. Councillor Callaghan.
Firstly, I just want to say thank you for all the work. 126 strategies, and I think there's a few more floating around as well. It is a mammoth amount of work to consolidate the strategies as well, but also to prioritise what's actually important, especially at this critical time when we're talking about our budget and making sure what we've got in the budget actually meets what our community needs. So thank you.
Thank you. Just on that note, Mr. McGrath raised that the strategies that are in the current budget align with the capital projects or resources that are available. I'm sort of a little bit lost with that, because I think there is one, particularly the MOVE strategy, that doesn't align with any capital projects that we've got planned for the next 4 years. So by the time we get to those capital projects, it would have expired. We'd have to redo it again. I'm just wondering what that looks like. If this project, in terms of the strategies and removal of strategies, and was in alignment with the budget preparation process, because to me, it's a little bit out of whack, and I just can't understand if that's the philosophy, why that is still in there. Is it Bridget? Miss Leopold?
Thanks for the comment, Mayor Mack, and I probably just want to clarify the MOVE strategy as an integrated transport strategy seeks to address a number of issues from active transport to vehicular transport. Things that might fall under that could be the review of areas like Shooter Avenue, Diamond Drive, those sorts of things that we are putting some investment into over the coming years. Also the walking and bike riding connectivity or network plans. So those sorts of things do largely fall under activities that have been, I guess, prioritised through the MOVE integrated transport strategy.
So we'd spend $500,000 for 3 projects in 4 years.
In terms of the items that are listed in.
They've already been determined, not Diamond Drive and Shooter Avenue. So why do we need a MOVE strategy to tell us that?
Sorry, I don't know what your question is exactly.
Well, you're developing a $500,000 consultation for items that we've already determined need to be done.
No, not necessarily. So the walking and bike riding network improvement plan is about mapping those areas where we have existing paths and bike riding routes that may not connect. Your point is right that there are some areas like the CBD bike path plan that is already underway that wouldn't need to be addressed through that. But there are other areas, and we've seen it through the public exhibition submissions, where people are seeking connectivity, and that work, which is in the 4-year delivery plan to be finalised next financial year, will assist in us prioritising those works. But you are right in that some elements have already progressed because of the need and urgency.
No problem. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Squire. Thank you, Pip. Wonderful presentation. I echo your sentiments. Councillor Callaghan. Okay, we've got the BGC 9.2, the 26-27 operating and capital budget public exhibition submissions. Who has got that one? Mr. Hasty? The rest had a team. There's just yourself. Big shoulders.
Thank you, councillors. So look, the purpose for this presentation, it's not a huge presentation. We know that you've seen the attachments and, you know, the submissions that we've had received. So it's really just a high level presentation that will go through some of the metrics around the submissions that we received. And then really the purpose for this presentation, this slot today is an opportunity for us to discuss what we read, you know, like both as councillors and back to council as well. So really purpose for today is just to share the feedback and allow an opportunity for us to, like we have done in our PMBS meetings, an ability to discuss what we've read. So look, a quick highlight of the engagement that we went through as part of this process. So we are required to do 28 days. We did a little bit longer than that. We had a number of pop-ups and engagement, like in-person sessions where we went to different parts of the community groups and went through the budget process. We had physical copies at the library, and then we had a number of different social and digital channels that we used as far as trying to get the message out there. The documents we exhibited for feedback this year, again, this was the first year where we haven't had PMBS sessions. So the strategy that we decided that was best to communicate the budget fully was to have a number of smaller documents so that it was easier to read, easier for the reader to, you know, flick specifically to the book that they were looking for to get the information that they wanted. Very open to any feedback on that, but that was the process. These are the documents that we exhibited. Obviously, we had a website which we were looking to receive feedback, but we did receive some feedback outside of that, you know, so just general emails into the council. This is just a list. So what we found was that the submissions that we received outside of the channel that we provided, they were probably pretty long form letters, and they had multiple items in them. But we did have some that were specific to unique parts of the community. Website engagement really just highlights when people hit the website. Normally this was when we had something in the Board of Mail, or when we had something on Facebook, or we'd gone to see or we'd had an in-person presentation. But this highlights how many views we've had and how many contributions we've had. If we look to our report downloads, again, as people hit our website, just some metrics on what most people started to download when they looked at it. It's fair to say that generally speaking, our operational plan delivery program were the big documents that we had downloaded. You'll actually notice there's draft 26-27 fees and charges report for public exhibition. It's around 6th or 7th on that list. It's in there twice. And that's just because there were two versions of that document. So one had a markup on it and we pulled it and put a new one on there. So just for reference, but that's basically saying if you're 105 and 76 for those two, was about 180 people that were interested and downloaded the fees and charges report. But again, that went through the report downloads entirety. If we then look back to the feedback, so again, when we asked everyone to provide feedback in the Have Your Say, we had a section that said, well, what are you contributing to? Like, what would you like to say that you're talking about? And this is a horrible slide to read in this format, but generally speaking, a lot of it was around projects, you know, and then we had a big section down the bottom, which was, I'm actually reviewing all documents. So I guess the small comment from me, and again, I think this is more an opportunity for all of us to discuss what we read and have any questions that we might have answered. But I thought some of the submissions we had were really fantastic, actually. And I think when I read through some of them, I was, I guess, quite pleased that some of the suggestions we had are suggestions that we are absolutely looking into now, and we have been looking into for some months. Like everything, it takes a little bit longer than we'd like to get some of this work done. So it's a work in progress, but I guess the only other thing I'd say is that it's interesting reading this feedback, you know, like these are challenging decisions that we have. There's a lot of comments within the documents around being frugal and making sure that we're showing savings operationally. And so I guess that's the task that we have, and looking at how we do that as part of accelerated service planning, and then greater looking at general services and if there are services that could be reduced. But really, from here, it was more an opportunity for any discussion or questions.
Councillor Clayton.
Thank you. So feedback, yes, the submissions were amazing. Absolutely amazing. Lots of detail, lots of suggestions, lots of areas where you're absolutely right. We're aware that council is considering them. There were also ones where we're actually undertaking the work already, but clearly we haven't made that, or we haven't blown our trumpet sufficiently enough, so that the community is aware of it. And there were a lot of people saying you need to get your own house sorted before you start telling us what we need to sort, or asking us for more money. The reality is we are. And so clearly we need to get, I think it highlights we need to get that message across. And I think when we're dealing with another report later tonight, it helps us with how we need to relay that to our community, that we're already dealing with a lot of these things, that we are already getting our own house in order. And there are think two that I recall, people making comments about the number of staff and how it's grown over years, theoretically. There was someone who was comparing it with other councils of local government areas of a portion. There's no acknowledgement by whomever they were about the difference in the work undertaken in each of those councils. For example, one reference was to Wagga. Wagga don't run their own water. There are all sorts of things that they're not aware of. Someone else was saying we should, we have 225 million invested is my memory of a figure in a document. And they said we should be, and it's not working, we should use that money, make it work. Yes and no. One of our problems is that there are certain amounts of money that we cannot utilise for anything else. They're put away there. I can't remember what the word is, but there is a word, restricted, that's it, restricted to certain areas, and they are buckets. So it's got to be spent in that bucket. So there are all sorts of things that were raised. And I think the other thing I gleaned from it, and you're right, lots of people made reference to projects. Many some who provided an entire list of, I don't support that, I don't support this, I don't support that. But there were quite a few who supported a number of the projects. And there was one submission in the long free submissions, not the have your say on the website, but the submitters' letters. It was someone who had moved here 10 years ago for university and has stayed. That might ring a bell. Married, living in the middle of town with something that's
Teacher.
Two teachers.
Fantastic submission.
Yeah, and there were a lot of insightful things in that submission, and that really highlights a number of things. One is that we have a connected community. We have an invested community here in Albury. And we also have a community who has a bit of information about what we are trying to achieve, some more than others. And going back to the point I made earlier, how it indicates to us as a council and our staff how we need to sell that or deal with that when we're dealing with the budget as a whole, but also the other reports we're going to deal with tonight. And there was one other factor. And it also shows that we have a community who are happy to engage, and clearly the process that this engagement process for this budget was clearly good because we had some significant feedback. There will always be, if you were to ask people, would you like to pay more rates? Of course they won't want to pay more rates. You can ask people, do you want to pay higher taxes? Of course people won't want to pay higher taxes. Who's going to go along and say, yeah, I'd like to pay higher taxes, thanks very much. People don't want to do that. Would you like your interest rate to go up on your mortgage? No, people don't want that to happen. So if we can sell that message, cover off on all of those bits of information, not all, can't cover off on all, but on the significant pieces of information that our community are not aware of, then I think that will assist us and our community to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you. I would agree, Councillor Glacken, that there were some absolutely fantastic submissions, and Jason Hanson's was very insightful. And what I really took away from it is his two teachers, a young family, and really what it boils down to is that he doesn't want to pay an SRV because his family can't afford it with the cost of living right now. Throughout the public submissions, what I noticed was there were a lot of people saying there's a lot of nice to haves and that they don't want to pay an SRV. And then on the flip side, there was another group of people who were saying, we really want this, but we also don't want an SRV. And so that is really difficult to balance. And I think the reality is, if we don't want to go down, I know it's another item on the list, if we don't want to go down the path of an SRV in the order of 40%, we have to make some really tough decisions. Projects that I have certainly loved, endorsed in the past, would love to see come to fruition, but the reality that we've walked into in this councillor term was not what we realised, and some of those really hard decisions are coming. And I don't believe that we've gone hard enough on the budget, and I spoke to that previously, and I think there is an opportunity to go harder. I think we've reached out to our community a lot now, and I would probably go as far as saying, yes, we've got some great responses, but I'm hearing that people have survey fatigue, and we really need to be capturing information that we received last December through to that January, February period as well. And I know we are using that to inform our budget as well. But my question to a staff member is, we capture all this great information. What next? You know, previously, the original budget that we get given, we look at, we give it all this feedback, and it comes back in the same iteration as what it is. In many other situations, we get this was the original, but here's option, 1, 2, 3, 4. Is it possible moving forward that we actually capture that information from our community and from the councillor group and come back with alternative options that look at different priorities in the budget?
I'm happy to speak as a start, and then potentially whether or not, Gail, if you've got anything to add. But so I totally agree. And I think, the early work that we've done, and since we've started looking at a potential SRV, we're now working with the same contractor that would do our annual survey to see how we're going with the city. And they've already pointed out, they've said, look, you've already got this process started, like with part of the work you did with the accelerated service planning. I guess how I see that work, then adding to the changes that we might make, is that we had some pretty clear feedback as part of that work to say, well, this is what we value, and these are other sections that we value less.
Yeah.
I guess all of that has made its way into what was originally the Morrison Low accelerated service planning. Now we're combining it all just into operations, which will be ongoing operations for the next 5 years. There will be no doubt a section of council that will be streamlining the ship day in, day out. So that work has now made its way, and there will turn into proposals that will come back to this decision body to say, well, okay, we've got some feedback that this area of council, that externally we made a decision on years ago to be a leader in, maybe we should slimline that spending. The trick will be in doing it, exactly like what we've seen with other parts of the spending, like, say, for example, within pools, which is pretty topical. We're going to have similar sort of things with other parts of our services as well. Gail, did you have any additional thing to add to that?
You've covered most of the points there. So in short, I guess, Councillor Callaghan, all of the information that we've been provided today is informing all of our future decisions. So all of our strategic planning work that's going on and the current reviews that we've got, plus future reports that will come up to council. Furthermore, the quarterly budget reports that you'll see iteration after iteration, and there already is work underway around options analysis for the budget. And I think Steve's going to add a point.
Can you read his mind too?
Can
Mr. McGrath.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. If I can just add one thing. In all of the messaging that's been provided to the various community stakeholder groups that we've presented to over the last month or so, and in all of the sessions with our people, our workforce, we've been very clear in saying that the council has a desire to be very transparent about the process. The budget that's there for 26-27 more or less maintains the service mix and the levels of service that council has committed to previously. And what's been suggested is any move to review the services provided or the levels of service provided would need to be the subject of engagement with the community to get feedback as to how they feel about potential reduction in services in some areas, but also importantly to engage with the workforce, our people, because they're part of that delivery of those services. So engaging them and taking them on the journey is critically important as well. I think the message is that there's a dedicated program that's committed to working through that, but it doesn't change immediately overnight. It's got to be a very planned, strategic and transparent process. That's the key message.
Thank you, Mr. McGrath. Councillor King.
Just following up on what Councillor Callaghan had to say, are there little wins that our submitters have given us some ideas for that could potentially be implemented that don't necessarily involve, you know, this big community engagement process? Because, you know, if we've gone to the community and we've asked for their feedback and there are some wins and some little nuggets in there, I think I also would benefit from some recommendations from our team in terms of, even as we've got the draft, but given this feedback that we've had in this area or that doesn't involve, you know, big communication because it's not a massive level of changing to service levels, is there scope for some options for councillors to consider when adopting the budget, rather than a councillor or two coming up with, let's put this in, but let's not put that, and then debating it on the night, and because I don't think that's very helpful. So I'm just not quite sure what a helpful process might look like based on some of the great feedback that we've had.
Mr. Hasty.
My thought from that, and it's a great point, is that we've now, as Mr. McGrath mentioned a second ago, like we've now dialing up a team like the enterprise PMO that will start looking at change management. I would suggest that as part of their operation, we're going to be having, it will be post 30 June, I guess, but like the intention is that that's exactly the sort of reporting that you'll see as part of the change management initiative. I guess the trick between now and the budget, when I think about like in reading them and rereading them again today, the items that stood out for me were items that we're kind of already looking at. And to be fair, a lot of those items aren't necessarily quick wins either. You know, there was a lot of talk about property strategy, let's talk about realignment within the organisation. These are all efficiency measures and or medium to long-term things. So like being able to go, yep, it's a quick win. It's probably not much that really like I could read in that. But that being said, I would think that a helpful process would be if there are any amendments to the budget, especially in a project sense, if it's decided, you know, like between now and, you know, the budget meeting, operational changes, I guess, that will regularly come up to this group anyway as part of quarterly budget reviews. In fact, that's the absolute intention, to say SQBR change management initiative has been really focused on these specific things, and we're now at a point where we understand the implementation costs, because that's another little trick, is that any of this sort of change, if there's a turn off or turn down, there's generally a cost or a thought or a legislation or a how long have we been doing it for, and that's where the time comes. And it's very important for me that we don't overpromise to say, actually, you know what, we've got 2 million we can knock off like that. And then we get into the weeds and go, actually, you know what, we can't even do that for 2 years because we're committed and or there's costs associated. So I would say that future quarterly budget reviews will look to do exactly what you've just suggested anyway.
Thank you.
Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you. I would probably argue that we have actually gone through that consultation process with our community about service levels, about capital works projects, and reductions in services as well. It's definitely questions we've asked our community for the past more than 6 months now. I think this budget is critical and implications are huge, and I think leaving it to the quarterly budget review is a bit late, to be honest, because we're looking down the barrel of an SRV. If we don't have everything in order at this budget, then there are really big implications for our community. And to be honest, I think we need to be eating baked beans for a little while and be really realistic about the money that we have to spend. And, you know, I speak to people often, and if you don't have the money to do the renovation on the house, you don't do it. And I think we need to be thinking a little bit more like that and be a bit tougher on what we're spending our money on. And I really think our house needs to be in order by this budget, not next quarter, because the next quarter we're looking at an SRV. So that's my observation, that's my opinion, and I gauge that too from reading the community feedback. Thank you.
Councillor Baldwin.
Thank you, Mayor Mac. I do have a question for the member of staff when I get through what I've got to say. Coming from a private world and coming into a local government world and learning the ropes in local government, how the process works, I get asked by people all the time about questions about how come things take so long, and I tell them there's rules, regulations, legislation that we've got to abide by. And some of the feedback here, I must congratulate our residents, and the feedback for this report has been, I think, from our residents, outstanding. And with discussions with the staff, I always say we've got to look in before we look out. And I think that we're making inroads in those areas. And to you, Mr. Hastie, could just for the people in the gallery and some of our people online, can you give us a couple of examples of a question of notice? I'm sorry, but a couple of examples of where we're making inroads into our budgetary constraints and how we're going to rectify them?
Thank you for the question. Look, I think the first thing that comes to mind is a good example around sort of an efficiency and responsibilities within teams. So as an example, and apologies if I've told you this story before, but cleaning as an example within Albury City is, you know, we've got a lot of buildings, we've got a lot of operations, you know, we've got a property and building team and we've got individual teams. So let's use the airport as an example. So it's pretty easy that we've got a contract for cleaning that's held within our internal services. And then we've got, you know, potentially ad hoc spot cleaning that could be done at the airport. So little changes such as centralizing all that together, that just over time, as you've got people that leave and, you know, new systems put in place and it's, you know, something that's happened and I'll just, you know, get a little bit of spot cleaning over here as part of, you know, the airport works. We've made a distinction in being able to say, well, let's take a landlord and tenant kind of operation. And in which case, just simple things like where does even the expense go? Because it could go to an internal property and building sort of area, or it could go to the airport operations. So being able to consolidate that and to say, well, look, let's really take a centralized approach. Let's get the cost in the exact appropriate spot. And we've seen just within that, like there's about 300 grand difference in cleaning year on year. And that's where you've got budget item holders within certain teams because there's much more pressure from financial management to make sure that we're really communicating and working with everyone about their budget and being over budget, then that's seen a big improvement. That's one area. I would say another little area, and again, it was brought up in the submissions, was just around fees and charges. So there was there's a few submissions that talk about the users of a specific service should be paying more for that service and not having it subsidised by the ratepayer base. Absolutely fantastic point. Sometimes that's tricky in practice, you know, but that being said, for the last 2 years, we've had significant increases in fees and charges in certain areas. And that's to make sure that where appropriate, trying to pass the cost of a service on to those that are using that service, but also ensuring where for some of those fees and charges internally, we're taking a commercial mindset for it. You know, again, and I've probably shared this in here before, but if it takes 5 hours for a trade waste operator to do a complicated trade waste application, let's just not charge $99 because that's what we've been doing for 5 years. So there's certainly, as 2 quick wins, I'd probably need to get my heads in the weeds a little bit more, but there are certainly, and as part of change leadership, as part of financial management, there is a lot of Albury City that are now really looking at lots of little 1% ideas that can help improve the budget over time. And in fact, we are seeing that absolutely now as part of our March quarterly budget review. So we've projected a conservative general fund deficit for this year, and I'd like to think, touch wood, that we will perform better than that.
Also a statement again, Mr. Mayor. The thing that pleases me is, yes, it's making improvement, but with the reporting that we've had with the Morrison Low and the services review, we are actually making progress. And we as councillors, I can tell our residents that we as councillors are 100% behind getting the budgets back in order. There's a little bit of work to do, and there'll be a few hard decisions made at some stage, but we are working on it. The staff are working on it. We're all working on it together. And as I was saying, we're all in it together, unfortunately. We've just got to get the right decision in the long term.
Thank you. Councillor Glycan.
Thank you. Through you to the most relevant member of staff. There was an answer provided tonight that it's probably best if we deal with some areas or some projects in the next or subsequent quarterly reviews. And I'd just like to clarify that a little, tease that out a little bit more, if I may. And so my understanding is that, and that was with reference to the budget, because we're in the budget period now, we need to deal with that budget. So I just wanted to confirm my understanding of the answer that was given, and that is that we are a significant way down our process for this year's budget. The work of council continues. It just doesn't stop. And so there's no real ever line in the sand. We just need to keep moving forwards, and we change things along the way. The draft budget that went out, there'll be some tweakings that the staff will make based on feedback from the community. But the reality is, the feedback that we've had, it might be one person who says, I don't support that project, or 3 people of 57,000 people who say, I don't support that project. So we can't really fundamentally change that draft budget that we've put out. However, over time, as we progress through the work of council and we get towards the next budget, it will have afforded us, the staff and the community, to gather further information, and perhaps at those, each time we review the budget and the new projects are being brought forward for further discussion and for sign off from the council to take the next project forward as we continue down the path. It is at that stage that we would then be saying, actually, you're right, it doesn't stack up. We're not going to do that project, or we're going to change this other project. So my understanding is that we should largely take the draft budget forward with a few tweakings, acknowledge the feedback, and as we progress, alter the path of each of those projects, should that be required as we move into the future. Is that really, have I understood that correctly?
I hope that I answer this right. But generally speaking, let's break the budget up into operating and projects and capital. So as far as operating changes go, that's hard to change now. Just because it's like, let's say, for example, let's not do any work on Botanic Gardens for the next 6 months. That's a budget change. So that is a hard decision to make now, because we've got people lined up, we've got equipment bought. That's hard to do within 2 weeks of 30 June. If we then go to projects, and I guess if there's a general consensus, because we need to remember that the council officers, through years of strategy development that has largely come as part of decisions from council, have said, well, this is important to us as part of this community in all different parts of our community, whether it's move, whether it's parts of economic development. You know, these are all significant projects and areas that our community has asked us to work on. And so we've scaled up. In the last 2 years, we've taken a lot out of the capital works and our projects. But I would say that if there were budget amendments at this point in the budget and it was operational, I'd say that's hard to do now. If it was project related, especially if it was a project that was in years 2, 3 or 4, then it could be easily for us to say, well, okay, we're going to pause this project. We're going to do more analysis. Is there room to de-scope it? And then there might be, you know, a project in this coming year where from everything we've read, we say, well, look, we'd like to make an amendment and we don't think that this is reasonable to do right now. And maybe it's something that we bring on later. I hope that answers your question.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
that was fantastic. Great answers. Covered everything I was asking. Thank you. Happy with that. Thank you.
I didn't even speak. Well done. Councillor Callaghan.
I have a couple of questions, if I may, through you, Mayor, to the most relevant staff member, Mr. Hastie. The current draft budget guides what an SRV would look like. Is that correct?
Current draft budget is an indication of a continuation of our operations at this point in time, with some streamlining that has happened over the last 3 to 4 months, and in which case I would think of it more like a large moving entity. This budget shows how that entity is moving in that direction, and in which case, with that movement, the long-term financial plan document was there to assist in decision-making, to say, assuming we continue down this path, then this is where we're likely going to end up. And if we don't like that as an option, then we will change course at here or here or here in order to be somewhere different. So, yes.
So not making any adjustments to this budget that we may endorse, it is likely we'll be definitely down the road of an SRV if we don't make changes to this budget, if we're not hard enough on this budget.
So I would say that not necessarily is the answer I would make to that. And I would suggest that, again, if we come back to an SRV, the way we've described it as part of our budget packs is that we've got large debt and we've got an operating deficit. So really what we need to get on top of is bringing the general fund back into a break-even position. That's operating. So that means that the SRV is really, there's 2 ways that we solve for getting the general fund back into deficit, and that is an increase in income or it's a reduction in expenses. To keep it simple, all of the change management work that we've been doing is in highlighting that expense management to say, well, what could we do differently? How could we streamline the organisation? What ideas have we got? What little projects could we see a rate of return on? And we're working through those now. But like we've said, they take time.
Just one other one. You mentioned that the operating budget, it's hard, but it's not impossible to change.
Yep.
Correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mayor Mack. Question to Mr. Hastie, or I think it's a question. So to impact the deficit in the short term, a lot of cost cutting here and there where we can, but that doesn't change the trajectory much in the short term. Is that in the expense side?
I'd say if we're talking in hypothetical scenarios, we know that we need to spend a certain amount on, so since coming into the position and breaking up capital into both renewal or large generational and non-generational. So if we think about non-generational assets, we know keeping it simple, we need to have a certain amount that we spend on our asset renewal every year. Partly why our debt is where it is because we've been funding some of that asset renewal through debt instead of through cash flow. And that's allowed to happen, but it's probably not the best. So that said, if we were to have large changes to our expense base in the short term, that would mean that we could fund more of that renewal through cash. So in answer to your question, any reduction in expenses that meant that we had more cash flow in order to fund the 16 to 20 million, just talking about the general fund now, in renewal work will absolutely make a difference. It's just coming to how we make the decisions around that expense reduction, because there is absolutely work that's happening now around efficiency reviews within Albury City, but that will come to a point and then it is just hardcore reduction. And if we saw anything over the budget pop-up sessions, is that a little bit of money makes a big difference in the eye of some parts of the community. And so again, if we found 3 to 5 million of efficiency reviews, it's finding the rest in service reduction, and that is lots of little bits added up.
Yeah, and can I follow up? That's true, but when you've done the projections over the next number of years, we're only coming back very slowly each year. So it's what, 18 million deficit this year, projected to gradually go down, but without. So if you really had to cut heavily, it's not going to be in service reduction. It would have to be somewhere else if we want to correct this really, really fast.
I think there's a plan that we'd need to have in order to fix the deficit. And then there's a practical application of just cash flow and spending that would happen if we went down a no SRV path. And that would be a reduction in services, like we've mentioned. There'll be a streamlining and efficiency. But likely, just from a pure maintaining cash position, it would mean that we would need to be thrifty on our asset renewal, which is not something that we need to do. So again, I guess in answer to your statement is we should be focused on purely fixing the operating deficit, which is in operating expenses as part of the general fund. Practically, if we said we're going down a path of no SRV, because that's a decision we want to make, there would need to be other measures we would need to have in the short term, because the LTFP that we've shown says that in year 4 or 5, we're seeing risk we don't want to see. If that answers, I think, your statement.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. McGrath.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm listening to some of the questions and the commentary, and the quick wins that we refer to is often in capital, which is your asset renewal and some of the generational projects that we've talked. They're the items that are say relatively easy, if you like, to descope or to cut, but that won't help that operating deficit of 18 mil. So that's the key message. The reality is that the long-term financial plan at the moment suggests that the next year or two, you could see a gradual improvement on the operating deficit, but then it will start to, the deficit will start to climb again. And that's just symptomatic of the fact that the sort of cost increases that council's operations are exposed to exceed the annual rate peg. So you're not in the longer term, you're not getting out of that hole. The reality is, and I may have been misunderstood earlier, but the reality is that if you're looking to totally avoid an SRV, you're talking about at least $18 million worth of cuts to your operating profile. And that means services. It means the year in, year out services that you provide to the community. Now, the challenge is, if you were going to take that approach, what do you cut? Or how much do you cut off certain services? And I'm probably not going to make people a fan of myself, but at the community presentations over the last month or so, in some of those gatherings, I had people from the community make comments like, well, a good example was just close the pool. We don't believe the pool should stay open because it's costing the ratepayer. So that statement was made. Cut mama. These are the things that, and the challenge is that everyone has very different views about what should be cut. And that's the problem. And I guess that's where I refer to the need to be very transparent and have a strong engagement pathway with the community to understand what those cuts might look like. I think everyone knows that. I don't know one community that says, great, give me a special rate variation. That just doesn't happen. What I took from some of the submissions that we've seen come back, and I read through them all yesterday, there are some in there that are acknowledging the difficult position that council's in, and as unpalatable as a special rate variation is, some form of SRV might be part of the solution. The challenge for council and the resourcing that we've just about got in place now to drive the change program is to try and quickly identify the sort of areas that we can improve via efficiencies, and to systematically go through the services and levels of service. And hopefully by the time council gets to, assuming council agrees to progress with an SRV engagement activity, by the time you get to October, November this year, and you need to make a decision on what the quantum of that SRV may look like, I would hope, and I would almost suggest that it will be something significantly less than the sort of figures that are talked about in the long-term financial plan at the moment. And that's just symptomatic of the process that's looking to be rolled out over the next 6 months or so, both internally through the Change Leadership Program, but also externally through the engagement with the community as well.
Thank you. Just they've lit up on your own, so I'll just actually not ask you any questions. I just want to clarify something. Just in question, and a lot of the submissions mention that we need to clean our own house, we need to demonstrate good leadership, we need a lot of things we need to do, and unfortunately they don't watch council meetings, or they don't keep track of the media. But essentially in the last 18 months, we've done an organisational review in part. We've done an internal audit of our budget process and preparation, which is something that the finance team have had to adopt as well during that period of time, which is a vast and incredible undertaking to do that as well as do the budget. Morrison Lowe, the service review, it's something that has been quite significant in the business, which every department's had to review and look at, and every service lead and every team has had to review and understand what they can do and what they can't do, and how they can save funding, save money. At the moment, we have our Change Management Leadership Steering Group that are looking at the Morrison Lowe review and all the other things that are happening in the budget to try and find those savings. So for those who think the organisation is not trying to do their best work, the people in this room sitting in front of us are doing that. And I find it really actually quite insulting that they think we just keep spending money because we can, because we all pay rates too, and we understand the responsibility to our community. So I just want to clarify that, because it's really unfair what I'm reading in these submissions that, oh, keep clean your own house before you start looking at an SRV. It's not like Steve said, it's not something we say everyone should enjoy an SRV. It's something you can have with your breakfast. It's not, we experience increases in our bottom line more so than an average household, because we operate a big business that provides services across a beautiful city. And it's quite clear that the community don't want to see cuts to the beautification of our city. So the elements of our city they want to keep, you've got to pay for. So it's a balancing process, but we're not wasting people's money. I just need to clarify that to the submitters, that we are doing, and you are all doing your best work to try and find those savings. Councillor Glacken?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, a question that sort of supports what you've just been saying. And that was a question that I had asked some time ago, and I'm not sure if staff have been able to put any time towards it, but I asked, what is the difference with the special rate variation? Sorry, not with the CPI or the rate cap, sorry. What's the difference between the rate cap and what the CPI or whatever it is that we use to compare that against over the period of time that rate capping has been used by the state government to control the rate increases? What has that gap been? Because I'm conscious that this is not something that happened in the last 3 or 5 or 7 years. This has been an ongoing problem for council and all councils because of the rate capping. And I know that that difference is, and it's probably more than the 18 million that we're in at the moment. And I have, as I've said previously, even if we did have an SRV, it's a catch up for that period of time, because ultimately the cost of running this business, any business in local government in New South Wales, is always going to be greater than the rate capping that is allowed. Is there a figure?
We have a slide coming up as part of the next presentation, and we'll talk about it, but
that would be great.
got it ready for you. Yeah.
All right. And it really supports everything that the Mayor was just saying.
Yeah, it was actually mentioned one of the inquiries, whether it's the federal or state level, what that figure was for New South Wales. It's quite significant.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Glacken. Okay, Mr. Hasty. Next presentation.
Thank you, councillors. So as we go from budget submissions, I guess, as we've sort of spoken about, the next stage is really talking about a special rates variation. So the purpose for this presentation is really to talk about the community consultation efforts. And I think there was a statement earlier made by Mayor Mack around some of the submissions we received. I think that I saw I was very optimistic actually in reading some of the submissions, because it did highlight a very fair and balanced view of where we are. But I think it's our job now, as part of the work we will do over the coming 6 months, if we decide to go down this path, to talk to people one-on-one and in their communities around how this will affect them and what it means. So the purpose for today, for this presentation, is to go around like a bit of a purpose for an SRV, the background of Albury City. We're going to do a little bit of a discussion around some history and Group 4. So the way we are measured as part of the OLG is in a group. And so just saying, like, well, this is what our peer group is doing. As per a discussion or a question earlier from Councillor Glacken, we're going to have a look at the cost index versus a rate peg and a calculation and like a catch-up amount, I guess. We'll look at some SRV proposals, one of which is slightly different to what you've seen as part of the long-term financial plan, and we'll explain why we've done it like that. Then we'll go into community engagement and next steps. So, background.
Thank you, Ryan. So, yes, the purpose of the next couple of slides is really to provide some context, because whilst we've been focused on our own financial sustainability journey, which is as you'd expect and rightly so, there has been an increasing focus on financial sustainability of local government, really at an industry level. And that's probably best evidenced by the fact that there's been 2 parliamentary committee inquiries at a federal and state level in recent years. And also, as you can see from the slide, the Auditor General, who now is responsible for auditing the financial statements of all councils in New South Wales, each year tables a report in the New South Wales Parliament on local government, and in the most recent report, felt compelled to draw attention to some trends that, again, place that focus on financial sustainability of local government more broadly. If you just go to the next slide, it provides a bit of information about the degree to which and the frequency with which councils are applying for SRVs. It says there that in the past 5 years, about a third of councils have applied for an SRV. That's probably been a bit conservative. I should point out that the number of applications doesn't necessarily equate to the number of councils, because there have been a number of councils that have applied on more than one occasion. And there are some councils that over the last 10 years have applied for up to 3 SRVs. So, as Ryan mentioned, we're in OLG Group 4 for benchmarking purposes, and you can see there over the last 10 years there have been 27 applications from Group 4 councils, including 7 councils that have applied multiple times. All of those have been either approved or partially approved. But I should just point out one matter in that last dot point. I did, after reviewing the public information on the IPART website, there is in that range one outlier where a council did seek a variation of just 2.71%. So the figure at the lower end of the scale is 2.71%, but certainly at the top end of the range, it's still 64.3%. So that gives you a bit of an indication of what's happening across the state.
Thanks, Pete. So moving on to the question, Councillor Glacken, that you mentioned at our last council meeting. So this was interesting, actually, digging into this. This slide is really a visualisation. And at the point of doing this slide was really to communicate what we'd seen since COVID. I mean, really, I think if anyone watches interest rates like I do, you might know that before COVID, we were in a pretty low inflation environment. And then COVID hit and it all changed. And that had a pretty big impact. So if we're just looking at a major part of the expense base for a city council comes off the back of a construction price index, rather than, like a general CPI or a local government CPI that we would get as part of the rate peg. So as a simple visualization to say, well, look, you can clearly see that if we start from the same spot, that there's a differential that we need to essentially fund. Now, if we go back, we check a little bit of ABS data, what we notice is that before 2000, it gets a bit choppy, so you probably wouldn't go doing your analysis from there. We looked at 2001. We took a construction index. We went across New South Wales. We did the calculation twice. Once was when we averaged all New South Wales construction indexes. There's a few. And then we did another calculation that was relative to more areas specific to a local government, so roads and bridges and non-residential construction. If you go back to 2001 as a starting spot, and when we're trying to measure the performance of an index, we take a similar number, and from that baseline number, we apply the indexation of the 2 methods. The first being the rate peg, and the second being the New South Wales Construction Index. To keep it simple, we apply that work. So both start at the start line, we apply our indexes, we get to last year. Last year, the rate peg amount index was significantly lower than what we'd seen in the construction index. to the fact where it was what would we need to apply into the last year in order to balance it up so that they're even. Now, the two calculations that we did, one was 20%, the other was 25%. So if we take that and we say, well, okay, what does that mean? 58 million is our rateable income for next year. Let's say we said it's fair and reasonable that we go 20% because we've missed out. And we think that a majority of our costs are influenced via the construction index. 20% is about $11.5 million off a deficit of what will be 19 next year. So it's certainly a big jump, 60% of what we would need in order to bridge the gap of that deficit. Now, I think there's lots of arguments we could have in doing this work. I think the point of mentioning this is there are lots of arguments around Albury City being financially prudent through that period. But what this does show is that over a significant period of time, that is stuff we need to find that funding over time, and that's hard. And that means that small services need to reduce a little bit every year. Even coming back to a comment that Councillor Mack made earlier, our budget next year is lower than we've got now as part of the March Quarterly Budget Review. We have a $70 million staff base, and that goes up by 4%. So the fact that we're going down is already a good sign that there are cuts that we have made. And that's kind of what this research is showing. So that's our cost increase versus our rate peg. If we then get to this next table as our SRV proposals, scenario 3 is actually different than what we have communicated as part of the long-term financial plan. But we'll go through each one individually. So scenario 1, it's very important that we have as part of this table what it would look like with no special rate variation. And this is actually really important because I don't think it's fair to say we're going to have a 42% increase without identifying what the increase would be without a special rate variation, and in which case that's 11.19%. Scenario 2 is exactly how we presented as part of the long-term financial plan. So it's 42% over 2 years, 21% year 1 and year 2. But you'll notice that there's an empty box in there in the 29.30 for scenario 2. And you'll notice that cumulative increase is 46.41%. So what this table is saying is the cumulative increase of that SRV scenario 2 is over that 2-year period. And that's important. The third scenario, because again, our goal from an executive point of view was to say, well, we need to write the budget. We need to get back to a break even. And we do that in year 4 with the 21 and 21. But what if we were going to make it better, provide less stress to our ratepayer, and we did it over a longer term? So that's where scenario 3 comes in. How do we get a similar type of result? And in which case, instead of breaking even in year 4, this scenario would break even in year 7. But it means that it's spread over a longer term, which again is easier for the ratepayer to absorb. But you'll notice the cumulative increase is 45.5, which looks awfully similar to the second scenario, except it's over 3 years. So when we present our report, our next report, and it's just more the timing for this information to come to you, but we'll provide a cumulative increase over the SRV period. So in year 2 and year 3 for scenario 2 and 3, but we'll also present an apples to apples if everything was over a 3-year period, which would mean that that empty box would have 3.6 in it. Now, as part of any application, we would need to do these calculations, which outline how the SRV changes over a period. Again, a bit tricky to read here, but if you can see my pointer, you'll notice there's a 4% up here. Sorry, Councillor Baker. But so this is just saying that if we start at an average of 1,600 and we apply 3.6%, again, we've just rounded the decimal, then where we end up is 1,800 as our final spot. The cumulative increase for that that ratepayer is $186, and then it goes down our rating categories. What I would bring to everyone's attention is just the red box. So we've tried to make this simple from a presentation point of view. So for a no SRV option, that's our change over a 3-year period. If we go to the next slide, this is how that looks different for each of the options. So for option 1, the change over the 3-year period is 186. If we were to have a 42% over 2 years, it would be 770. If we had a total cumulative of 40% over 3 years, it would be 756. So we provide this table in order to highlight the difference between no SRV and or an SRV option. And we do that down the rating categories. It's very important to note the point down the bottom, and it was mentioned earlier. Again, we've decided that what are we solving for? We're solving for a general fund that breaks even in year 4. But in order to make it easier for the ratepayer, we've provided another scenario that would break even in year 7. As we go through the consultation period and as more work is completed as part of our change management, we're going to find savings. We're going to find more efficiency. It might be in those discussions and as part of our Micromex work that we've already done and reports that come to the councillor group. We say, this service, we're going to pause, we're going to be frugal, and in which case these numbers come down. And like Mr. McGrath said, like that's the process of the community consultation. What we've noticed in other applications for the SRV applications is just because you go to the community and say, we're trying to solve for this in year 4 or make it easier in year 7, that doesn't mean that that's what you end up going in as your application. So it gives us more time to shore up some of the bits that we're working on, have those discussions, and potentially come back with there's a better option than what we've got. But it's also interesting to note that the difference between, even in this scenario, a no SRV and a 42, so an option 2, is 35%. Okay, so if we're just going to have a little bit of a look at how the general fund, and we're just going to look at the general fund, for these 3 scenarios, how it plays out. So from an operating point of view, our base case scenario is that we maintain a deficit, and if anything, it gets worse. And there's a little bit where this will be absolutely watching every cent every time we come into we'd like to do a special project or think of something else. It's like, well, no, if anything, we're trying to rip things out of the budget. If we look at scenario 2, which is our 42%, over 21%, our break even is in year 4. And then what you tend to find is, the model shows that we improve as we go throughout the period. If we look at scenario 3, it's not as good as scenario 2, but you still see improvement. Now, if I'm being critical of my own work, these models highlight through best practice that we use a 3%, so the higher rate of the target band RBA from years 3 to 10. Now, I have a little bit of concern that might not be what we have. The research we've already presented tonight shows that the construction index tends to outperform our ability to rein back income. So, and as part of the long-term financial plan, the bottom part of the report says, be aware if you see a 1% change in this or that or this, then that could have a pretty significant impact. So there's a little bit where having an SRV, as we mentioned in the long-term financial plan, helps us absorb things into the future. If we then think about debt, the general fund, again, we're already at a level that we probably don't like, and we see that chart go to a level that gets much higher. If we look at a 42%, what this line is telling us is that we get back cash flow that allows us to invest in renewals via cash, and we invest in some larger projects via cash and not bring on new debt. So that line is showing that we are basically paying back our chunk every year and not bringing in new allotments. The difference between scenario 3 is we tend to find that for our projects, trying to model out past 4 years is hard, absolutely. And so we park projects in years 5 and 6 and 7 because we know we're going to have to spend money there, but it's better to have it in the budget than not have it there at all. And in which case this line is showing that some of the larger projects, specifically in this case, a Lavington pool rebuild, means that we're going to need to get debt in order to do that in scenario 3.
Is this, yep, it is. Hi, thanks very much, Ryan and Peter. Thank you for your diligent work on the working group so we could pull all this together. Certainly, I've been brought onto this group to talk about the community engagement component of the SRV, which is a significant component and is certainly a significant body of work that we as an organisation will be undertaking over the coming months, with a report probably finalising to council in about October. I wanted you to start with something you said, Councillor Callaghan, about survey fatigue. Yeah, it is. And our community, we're asking a lot of our community at the moment. It's a very important time to ask our community. But we've also been doing community satisfaction surveys since about 2010. And I can say, because I've been here for every single one of them, that the top 1, 2 or 3 reasons are the drivers of satisfaction for our community are input to council decision making, that they're informed about council decisions, and long-term planning for Albury City. So I know we're asking a lot of our community, but our community are asking a lot of us, and they're asking us that they're informed, and they're asking us that they can have input into our decision making. So this is one of the tools that we'll be using to help inform you as councillor group into the decision making that you have to make. So as far as the SRV goes and IPARC goes, there's some objectives there that, and we also mentioned before that we're not seeking necessarily to get a 90 or 100% community support for an SRV. It's not going to happen. But what IPARC needs to see is that the community are aware and that the community are the most well-informed they can be as to why we are seeking this and what options we are proposing. So as far as our community engagement strategy goes, and it was attached to this report, we need to seek the widest consultation we can. We need to use the most variety of tools that we can. Not everyone's online. It's no good just doing a survey. Not everyone's going to answer the telephone from Micromex for the 300 representative sample people that we hear. There will be a host of and a number of face-to-face opportunities as well. So we need to make sure that consultation is as wide and as broad as possible, and we use as many tools as we can to make sure that that is out there, because IPARC need to see from us that our community are aware that this, not only this is happening, but also they need to be sure as to why it's happening. We need to clearly explain the options being proposed. And Mayor Mack, you brought it up very well. We need to explain how we've already looked inwards. We need to explain to the community what we've already done. So thank you, Mayor Mack, for actually summarising that earlier. We'll definitely be making sure that the information that goes out to our community states exactly that. What have we already done? What are our achievements in the areas of focus to date? The community engagement process is quite large, would be an understatement, but we needed to engage an independent consultant, and we're using Micromex again. As you'll be aware, they did the service areas earlier in this year. I think it was about January. But importantly, and someone might say, oh, you're paying a consultant, you know, that's quite incongruous with what you're actually trying to do here. We've got a multi-year contract with Micromex to do a community satisfaction survey. So instead of doing the community satisfaction survey, we asked them to change the scope for the community satisfaction survey to instead assist us with the SRV. So there's actually no cost to council. That was already contracted. So
Councillor Callaghan?
Sorry, can I just have some clarification? I thought there was $40,000 in the budget allocated for community consultation.
that's it. Was allocated for the community satisfaction survey as part of a multi-year contract. So we've just changed the scope. If we hadn't have done that, we would have had to pay for the community satisfaction survey and also seek the independent consultant. So what we've done is change the scope of that. So you're absolutely right, but that's the money that was already earmarked for the community satisfaction survey.
Thank you. So it's an additional.
And certainly by using Micromex, we can use the what's important to you service level consultation results that we've already asked. So Micromex have done 60 or 70 of these. We've had a lot of meetings with Stu from Micromex already, and pretty much whenever we mention a council, yeah, we did that one. We did that one. So we're very confident of their experience in this space. They've said that consultations generally go about 4 to 6 weeks. Ours is we've deemed to go to 6 weeks or 46 days. There'll be a QR code, which we find really, really works really well. People know what a QR code is now, thanks to COVID, and we do use those, and that'll be on all our collateral. Micromex will be analysing the opt-in surveys and also do a representative survey that you can hand on heart, say this is representative of our community. There'll be a report on any other methods that we get, as Ryan mentioned before. Sometimes they don't come in through our traditional methods, so we'll make sure we capture those as well. There'll be a report to council in October as to what all those results say. And then importantly, we need to close the loop back to the community saying, this is what we heard and this is what you told us. Our engagement consultant has also advised that we engage on the options in a numerical order. So you'll note that Ryan actually said there was no SRV, then there was a 42%, and then easier on the public was a 40%. But that could look confusing to our community. So when you see any posters or anything around, you'll see it goes SRV, then the 40%, and then the 42%. So I just wanted to make that clear that the consultant said in order so that they can then flip the questions, they thought it was better to do that in a numerical order so that it will be slightly different. The techniques we need to use are going to be wide and varied. Micromex said, wow, you're going to be busy. Well, yes, we are, because we intend to be and we want to engage as widely as we can. So there'll be a number of face-to-face opportunities. Our digital methods that we use already, and also some traditional methods. We're already sending out some rate notices in July this year. So there'll be look, let's put a hard copy rates notice in so to make sure it gets to everyone, or a digital one to those who receive their rates online. We're highlighting right up top of that, this does not apply to this rating period. This is only for 27-28, but what a great way of getting into our letterboxes. We thought about a letterbox drop. Wow, it does get to every home, but you know what? That costs $30,000 to get to every letterbox. So why not do it much more efficiently and put it out with a rates notice that's already going? So it's just another ways we've been thinking about how to do these things smarter at a cheaper cost to council. Whoops, went too far. These are the types of activities that I'm proposing in the community engagement strategy. So we'll have the council meeting on the 15th of June, where this is all subject to council in that meeting saying, yes, we want to go and engage on SRV. Subject to council voting yes that we will engage on SRV, we expect the people will be looking to have their say on the very next day. So we want to start that consultation off on the 16th. We can't have a gap of a week while we get ourselves sorted, because people will be looking for that. There's no time for that. So straight after the council meeting, there'll be some links already available for people to actually. Some of that information I've already mentioned as a technique. Briefing the customer experience team. Think about the telephone calls that'll come in, or people that'll drop in face to face. So we need to make sure we're doing that. Public notices, posters, social media, of course. Online rate calculator. Ryan, did you want to speak to that, how we might be able to use that? Sorry, threw you in it there.
Yes, so we've reached out to a few other councils around how they've done their special rate variations. We spoke to one specifically, Belgian Shire, and they've gone through a number in 6 years. So it was interesting talking about the cost index with the CFO there. But they had a tool, which was a rates calculator, and it was one that they developed in-house. They had it so that you could download it on their website, but they found as part of community consultation that they'd create a window of time to say, you know, 10 to 12, come down with your rates notice and we'll talk you through the changes. Like, we want to give you a unique discussion rather than a blanket discussion. So they'd lined up a number of councillors and senior staff, and as someone came in, yep, okay, come over here and we'll download the calculator onto the computer, and, or, you know, you just have a staff computer open up, you throw in your rates notice and it could say, well, right, here's where you're going to be if we make no change, and here's the change if we go down this path of an SRV. So again, it was just trying to make it clear for an average person to say, well, this is exactly how it's going to affect me. And then as part of the consultation, it was, well, okay, if we don't do this, and it's going to mean A, B, C. If we do an SRV, it means D, E, F.
Councillor King, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I'm just curious about how we're communicating the proposed SRV, because obviously in this frame we saw earlier in Ryan's proposal, it talked about, you know, a 14%, 13%, 13%, which assuming includes the rate peg. So I think when you say a 40% or a 42%, I think it can sound more than it actually is, because it naturally would have been 3.6, 3.6, 3.6. So that 14%, you're really saying it's an extra 11% more than what you would ordinarily be paying. Are we able to use that sort of language? Because I think that automatically, when you say a 40% SRV, people go, what, 40% more than what I'm paying now? Is there guidance on that and what we're able to do?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's certainly what we need to be explaining to our members of the community. And as Ryan said before, we need to show what that baseline is, which is that 11.19%, and they're paying that anyway. So yeah, the posters will say there might be some tables or some charts that say you'd be paying this anyway. The SRV will be that plus this, which equals that. So we need to make it very clear, a really good point, that it's not a 40% or a 42% plus the base rate that you would have been getting anyway. It's that it actually includes that.
Yeah, because I
that's a good
think
point.
that sometimes can get lost in a general sense.
And the more face-to-face conversations we have, the better we can explain that. It's pretty hard when you're sending out a poster that's
Having said that, even just having, you know, scenario 2, scenario 3 in our printed documents that go out for the public, that's the headline that people see. So I think even the way we putting together our proposals online and in the media, because that's what they're going to grab. So I just sort of think, you know, some really laser-eyed focus on what it is we're actually looking to potentially consider.
And the way.
And the way, yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much, Councillor King.
My observation.
So week one is a very much getting the case ready, and a whole lot of there'll be a lot of media, there'll be a lot of briefings. Week 2 is launching more into getting out and about. Week 2 and 3, so there'll be some videos, more pop-ups. We'll be at shopping centres. The social media notifications will just keep going. It'll draw people's attention to going back to that QR code. Radio interviews, we don't need to pay for those. The media's going to want to, you know, have conversations about this. We're quietly confident. So I'm sure there'll be some radio interviews that we'll use. Offer one-on-one support was like where Ryan was just mentioning about the rates calculator. We'll have the rates calculator also on our Have Your Say page, so you can just plot in your own number and actually work that out yourself. The representative focus group meetings, we're going to have a couple of these, and this is what we're planning to do, is work on our base of our community groups that already have representation. So it might be our multicultural group, or it might be our access committee, for example, and ask for a representative of each of those to be part of a focus group as well. So we'll run a couple of those group that are made up of representations across the community. Weeks 4 and 5, social media will keep going, but then we'll try and do some targeted stakeholder sessions, business community, community organisations, seniors groups, COG community, access committee. The drop-in session at council at daytime, I had to book the room, so that's how I know the date, 13th of the 7th in the Robert Brown room is actually already booked. So that's a drop-in session. There'll be posters around the room, there'll be finance team to hear, there'll be online rates calculators to work through, but there's a session where you can come and just get whatever one-on-one advice. The pop-ups will continue and the representative focus group meeting will continue. The last week, the social media will be saying, here's your last chance. It's consultation closes on Friday, the 31st of July. The Border Mail public notice will say exactly the same thing. We'll actually pay for those to actually say the consultation closing date. Any questions on those methods? Have Council Law's got some ideas on where are the gaps? What have we missed? Is there another method we could be using?
Councillor Billivan.
Thank you, Mayor Mac. A question to the relevant member of staff. During Mr Hastings' presentation, he was talking about the rates calculator from one of the other councillors, and he said that not only staff were involved in some of the consultation, but with some of the pop-ups, the councillors were involved as well. Is that something that, you know, our group would be interested in doing, as being in pop-ups and being involved in this, because it is going to have some issues around the town, and we need to have some explanations. And I think a face of the councillors out there with the staff saying we're all in it together might be advantageous to us all.
We'd love you to come, Councillor Billivan.
Just Councillor Billivan. Councillor Callaghan.
I think something else that's pretty important, and I think it's certainly not the formal process, and I know it doesn't always capture the nice side of what we see, but social media is absolutely a platform where people are communicating, and they often will take the time to write a message on that platform rather than going to the Albury City Council site. And you can take some of that with a grain of salt, but I absolutely think it's the way of the future, and we should be monitoring those sites as well. It's hard to get across all platforms, but I think being observant is pretty critical.
Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Callaghan. Absolutely, it's one of our critical platforms. We do need to be aware of risks, and certainly low awareness is not going to get us the result that we want. We'll have a community that's not aware of what we're doing. It won't meet IPART's expectations either. To mitigate that risk, we need to make sure that we're looking at what other councils have done and where they've done it successfully. And so certainly I know Pete's been doing a lot of work on that, and Ryan as well, to see what's worked. We've already seen a communications pack from other councils, and we insert new council name here type thing, because we know it works. So let's not reinvent the wheel where we can. Misinformation, that is certainly a risk. We need to make sure, as Mr McGrath said very early on, transparency is key with us. So we need to make sure that the risk of misinformation is mitigated. We'll actually create a dedicated SRV webpage on our site, not just for the Have Your Say, but actually a page where you can go to and read everything as a single source of truth. FAQs, consistent messaging. Community outrage. Was there a question? Sorry.
Yes, there is. Thank you very much. Through the Mayor to the most relevant member of staff, my memory is that during the local government election, the Electoral Commission had a fact check page on their website. And so they were putting up pieces of misinformation and correcting them. And I'm wondering if that might be something we could do so that we correct that misinformation, because me as a councillor, I could be telling everyone I run into at the supermarket, I could go to every supermarket in a day and give them all a bit of misinformation, because I'm a councillor, I know what's going on, and tell everyone I know everything that's going on, and sow a seed of misinformation in the community. Clearly council needs to be making sure that's right, that the information that is out there in the community can be misinformation can be corrected, etc. So I'm hoping that might be on that website as well, or that web page as well. Thank
Great.
you.
That's a really good idea. Thanks very much, Councillor Glacken. I can straight away see what you might be hearing and trying to address that and just get that in our correct tone of voice and addressing that as we go. So that's great. I've written it down. Community outrage and trust concerns. Yeah, that's a risk. It's going to happen, but hopefully it can be mitigated by the top two ones as well that I've already mentioned. Engagement fatigue, we mentioned that. It's real, but our community want to be informed and they want to have an input into council decision making. We need to make sure that we're protecting our people. The social media policy is actually coming to council very soon. We'll be blocking any harmful content that comes and anything abusive. We need to look after our teams. We need to make sure that if any of us are out talking about SRVs, we're not going out solo, that there'll be a group, there'll be a team of people there to look after each other. We'll be encouraging feedback through social media, through the QR codes, rather than necessarily hits underneath on that page.
Will you be protecting Councillor Bullivant? He's part of your team as well, and all of us.
I'll do everything I can.
I'm glad we're part of the OWL. Thank you.
All right, so next steps. Today, obviously, is the BGNC committee. 15th of June will be that council meeting where we'll be seeking your endorsement for community feedback on the SRV. We'll start that consultation on the 16th of June, which is subject to that outcome of that meeting on the 15th. Through August, we'll be very busy collating, analysing and developing that report. 7th of September, there's another council committee meeting, subject again to another item we've got later on tonight. And we'll be reporting those results to the 19 October council meeting. So are there any questions at all for any of us on the proposals or the community engagement, taking on board those great suggestions we've already received? Thank you very much.
Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, through you, to the most relevant member of staff. At the moment, we have 3 options, and I think it's good that there are 3, maybe 4 options that we would take to the community. I'm wondering, is it possible for, and it may be overcomplicating things, it may not be possible, and I accept that the answer may be a flat no. But would it be something that might be able to be considered that if we were to have an SRV, that the residents may be able to self-determine per resident or residents per rates notice, that they would like to do theirs over the 2 years or the, say, a 5-year, if there were a 5-year option, over a 5-year option, but that the outcome would be exactly the same. And if I could use an example, there were members of the community who wished to pay their rates notice in one lump sum and received a small discount for doing so. And there are other people who want to pay monthly and they want to pay on the last day of that month. They don't want to pay any earlier than they need to. And there are different people who may say, I actually want to pay a little bit more, but over 5 years. So if the aim is that we get 46.5%, the scenario 2, then if someone had to pay, including the factor in for the CPI, if over 5 years they were to pay 48%. So council would actually be making a little bit more, but over a longer period of time. And there were other people who said, I want to do it in 2 years. Is that an option for people to self-select the version that they want to do?
Yeah, if I can take that question, Councillor Glacken, if I understand it correctly, you're really asking whether we can apply an SRV differently to different assessments as long as the outcome is by and large the same. And I think the short answer is no, really. The legislation really just doesn't allow us to implement a rate levy that way.
Okay, thank you. I just thought some people might want to opt in for the quick pain. And others might want to take it over.
I think there'd be logistical issues as well, but I think from a legislative point of view, it's not an option.
Thank you for the answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Callaghan.
I just have a question, I think it's to you, Kate. Just talk about options, and I know as a councillor group, we've discussed it before on different issues, but I suppose this is one of the biggest issues facing our community. Would a citizens jury be something that we could potentially entertain? And it can be just take it on notice, think about it.
I think it's been discussed with Miss Evans-Bar. Miss Evans-Bar, we had a chat about
I've
this
got
the
it.
other day.
Thanks very much for your question. Citizens jury is not the right forum for an SRV. If I can just go to my notes. Citizens jury, it's a deliberative polling system. It's a deliberative decision support tool, providing recommendations to council after it's deliberated on all the options. The strengths are not wide-reaching tool nor a sentiment capture. It's actually, if council's not seeking approval, endorsement or advice, then the jury creates a trust risk, as there will be an expectation that council implements the advice of the jury. So the way I'm getting around a citizens jury, which might be 40 or 50 people, when we put all our resources into that, they make a recommendation that traditionally the council would then take. The way I'm working through that is actually through the focus groups, by actually doing it with smaller groups and doing it as a representative across the different community groups that we already use. So citizens jury, it has its place, but it doesn't have its place necessarily for where we're looking for awareness and wide reaching. A great tool to come to a deliberative recommendation to council, but we can't be held necessarily to what that recommendation is. And more to the point, as we've said before, we don't necessarily know what we're going to end up going out with. So if I go out with a 40 and a 42 and they decide on a 40, that mightn't be what we end up going out with if we go out at all. So
Yeah.
is that okay? Yeah.
Appreciate it. Just another one as well. I suppose originally when we started talking about this, it was a 14 to 20% potential SRV. This is double that now. It feels like it's gone from status quo to this big jump of 40, and understanding that the rate peg is included in that as well. Is there any consideration for alternative options? Because I feel like it's like status quo or 40%. It's kind of lump it or leave it stuff.
Yeah,
It's tasty.
there absolutely is. I think coming back to the history of how, what you've just described, we started off with 20 was the number we started communicating early, and that was really around a decision to ensure that we were always lendable via a certain covenant that we would have from our lender. As we discussed it from an executive point of view, there's definitely some logic to being able to solve it that way. However, it really puts us into a position where what if something happens? And, over the last 10 years, we've had a few of those sort of economic things. So in which case we then change to say, well, how about we adjust, instead of solving for debt covenants, and we say financially fit for the future is a general fund that breaks even. Not only does it mean that we're not using debt to fund renewals, but it means that, as we get toward the end of that 10-year plan and all of the good work that's happened within this group to say, well, we're building a city in the way we have, we're allowed to actually begin that work again. That being said, as we go through the consultation process, as we begin to find more savings and realise more ideas, because like we've started a train of work now internally, absolutely my hope is that we are not having an application that says 40% over 3 years, that it is improved from that. And that's because we've found an efficiency, we've dimmed some services, and we've worked out that we can actually do it with less. But that's the process that we will go through as part of our change leadership and how our community consultation all comes together.
Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mayor Mac. Question through you, maybe to Ryan. This is This is simplifying it for me, okay? Cars.
We don't have any money to buy any more cars.
No, when people are taking out finance to buy a car, and I think this is a little bit similar to that. Some people might take it over 3 years and pay it off a bit quicker, pay less interest. Others take it over 7, and they're doing it to keep the initial costs down, but it puts the term out. Things change in that period, and it's always wiser to try and do it quicker rather than take the long-term loan. And in a way, we are trying to get our debt down, and might be arguing for an SRV here, but also to do it faster rather than slower and get our ship in order through that process. And then we can, as you say, go on, because if we try and not have an SRV, do it by pulling back and cutting, we're still going to be in the same spot in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And at some point, we're either going to have to call on the community and get them to share the load and chip in, or try and do it by ourselves. And that's going to have a lot of pain for everyone and also the residents. So I don't know whether that was a question or a statement or a car thing, but yeah, if you can, don't go 7 years. That's the statement there.
I think it's a great analogy. The quick answer I would say is that no matter what decision we make, we are now in a world of trade-offs in decision making. There is no matter what we do, there is a sacrifice somewhere that needs to be made. So if we decide to do it up front, like you said, it's, and be efficient, that's probably the best financial outcome as far as if I'm looking at it practically from a general fund deficit and a general fund debt point of view. However, we might decide as a trade-off that we want to make it nicer for the resident, so we spread it out, but that gives us risk in areas that we need to be aware of, and we are probably more than likely moving into a higher inflation environment for the next few years. But yes, I think it's a good analogy, but no matter what we do, there's going to be risk or an unpopular outcome as a result of anything we do.
Councillor Gladkin.
Thank you. Through you to the most relevant member of staff. There was an answer given previously, or part of the presentation previously was about there was some councils that had applied for an SRV more than once. On one occasion, there was a council who had applied for 3 SRVs. Can I have clarification as to why they had multiple applications, including the 3? We've had a SRV that was used to be called a SVR some years ago. Is it that sort of situation where it's a significant period of time since, or is it the 3 applications were made in fairly quick or close proximity to one another in time? And why did they make those 3 applications? Was it they didn't ask for enough the first time, or they weren't granted that full amount the first time? Thank you.
Mr. Hastie.
Yep, so I'll answer this as a start, and then I'll throw it over to Pete if you've got anything that you'd like to add. But I started a discussion with Belgian Shire and the CFO there. We'd known that they had, actually we found them originally because they had a good online calculator. And I went, that's actually really good, like we're going to use that. Anyway, we started a discussion, and I had an hour with him just to say, look, what can you tell us about going through this process? And he said, well, we've done it 3 times in 6 years. Yeah. And he said, generally, what you tend to do is you go, well, just do a little bit because it'll help. And then you realise you need to go again because the costs of running services go up faster than we can get back in the rate peg. Now, comparing Belgian to Albury is hard, but his advice to me was, you need to be very careful about how you go and you do an SRV, you've probably already got some sort of indication on, New South Wales construction indexes, and, it opened up a world of discussions that he'd mentioned with other counterparties similar to him over this exact item. I guess where Albury is unique is that Bellingen has a smaller rate base. They don't have some of the commercial operations that we have. So they are a pure roads, rates and rubbish council.
Okay.
And that means that their ability to flex in other areas is limited. But his advice to me was like, we are going to need to go again in a couple of years, and we are already expensive, and I can't cut services. So it highlighted to me that there's a structural industry problem that we need to look at, but it also highlighted to me that you don't want to go and do this again in 2 years' time or 3 years' time because you've just taken a little slice and then you've realised that actually the costs have gone up more than you thought.
Thank you. And that really highlights what Stuart was talking about. You get your car loan and go higher. Yep. Thank you.
Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you. It's not a question, it's more feedback because it's the forum for providing it. But look, I really reflect on when we were elected 2 years ago and none of us signed up for this. Any of us in this room would have expected that this is the situation that we'd be facing. But however, I just don't think it's reasonable to continue to ask our community to pay more rates for a problem that they didn't create. And I think we need to do everything that we can before that happens. And I think that means pausing non-essential projects, continuing to review our spending, both capital works and core services, because I know there has been a lot of work done, but I genuinely feel, and the sentiment from the community is we can be doing more. And I think we are up for that challenge, and I think it's absolutely possible. I think we need to focus on maintaining the assets that we already have and not gold plating our projects, or even when we're doing that renewal, it's not overdoing it. It's just getting the job done and providing that service to our community. Prioritising our core services, we did our feedback from our community and they gave us some, 4 key major areas. And, one of them was footpaths, and that's not reflected in our budget either. So I think we need to get that balance right of what they've told us that they want and what that looks like in our budget, whether it's at this budget or the quarterly review, whatever it might be. But we need to be making those tough decisions to restore financial discipline. And I think our community absolutely expects that. I don't think that SRV is the solution at this point. I feel like it seems like a bit of a bailout for generational choices. I'd like to see us in a position where we're not asking our community for 40 to 42%. Thank you.
Councillor Glarkin.
Thank you. Bring us back to the special rates variation presentation from tonight. Lots of information. When will we be, as a council, looking at the actual figures as an idea that we would be putting out? Is it the figures that we've seen in here tonight? Is that what we would be relaying to the community, or will that be made available to us when we make that determination on the 15th of June?
So the numbers that we will go to the community are the numbers that we have in this. So these are the potential proposal options as part of community consultation. That's what we will be talking to the community about, and we'll gather information. We'll have more work in the background that's saying, okay, we've got some streamlining here and here, and that's starting to now pay dividends. That will be different to what our application will say.
Okay.
As we then say, well, actually now we've learnt this and this, we've now created some efficiency here and there. So whilst we said at the start that we were going to have a 42 or a 40, we can now come back to this decision body and say we'd like to apply for this, if that makes sense.
It does indeed, and thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Hasty. I think they've exhausted you. No more questions. Okay, we've got the proposed changes to the council meeting schedule, which is somewhat a contradiction in the terms because it's been changed anyway. But Mr. McGrath.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just while Gail's getting ready to lead this session, I did issue an email to all councillors late last week, it's hot news, as we know, but through the disallowance process in the Legislative Council, the regulations that guided the current model code no longer exist. So that's all very new, and everyone's trying to get their head around it. There will be a report to the June council meeting giving the way forward. It's so still evolving that I'm attending a session tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Brett Whitworth, the DepSec of the Office of Local Government, will be conducting a discussion with general managers about next steps and what options are available, which appear to me to be quite limited, but we'll be refining it over the next few days with a view to getting the report to council. Nevertheless, we already had this session planned because there is a review coming up. There's an opportunity to talk about council meeting schedule, which might be a little bit null and void whilst we do go back to the old and review. But there's probably an opportunity to get some feedback from you about what's working, what's not working, and how we could potentially make it better within the constraints of going back to the old code, knowing that the minister will come out with a new set of regulations and tighten things up in certain areas. But obviously, the message is that he will probably relax audio-visual attendance, those sorts of things. So with that background, Gail and others will take you through the material that we do have that we can seek some feedback on.
Ms Evans-Barr.
Thank you so much for your time this evening. And I'll just add to that. So it's quite likely at the next council meeting that we will be putting up a rescission motion to the 2025 meeting code of practice with the review that we are then reverting back to the 2021 meeting code of practice. Because that meeting code of practice includes the schedule for our 2 meetings a month, it was on a Monday, and also the pre-meeting briefing sessions, that means that we are likely to be in a position that we have to adopt that at this stage, noting that Mr McGrath has said that we're seeking some further information. So just so that councillors are prepared for that, we will of course have to discuss that internally as well, and we'll bring out all of the required scheduling and give you as much information and notice as we possibly can. But we just want to preempt that that may be a likely change that you'll have as a report coming up in the next council meeting. In terms of the discussion around this evening, so it's obviously slightly changed, but we do want to just sit down and take a moment and go, let's collect your feedback, because a number of you have provided your own feedback. We've also had some feedback from community as well in relation to the fact that meeting papers are coming out. And because we had so many people interested in providing public comment, we thought, all right, we might pull that together on a Thursday. However, it's not providing community enough time for them to actually present their views. So there's a couple of meeting options that you'll see in your pack tonight that says, okay, do we actually change the way that we, the night, I should say, that we have our meeting on as well moving forward. There's also a few of you have said, look, in terms of the scheduling of meeting, 1 a month doesn't really work. The committees aren't working quite as we like in terms of free-flowing discussion, but likewise, 2 meetings a month felt like it was a little bit too cumbersome, and, you know, did that really work? Interestingly, it was actually Councillor Glacken and Councillor Mack got in a conversation at the end of one evening, and it was, you'll see represented in part of the options tonight. Do we actually revert to a schedule where it might be a meeting every 3 weeks? So in some months it's 2 and in other months it's 1. And that was an interesting option that when we actually discussed that as a staff group, presented some interesting merit as well. The review that we've got going on, which we anticipated we would kick off and obviously has to go to public consultation and we'd seek feedback on, was due to come up to you at the next meeting. We'll obviously just put a little bit of a pause on that while we figure out what this next schedule looks like. But let's get into a bit of the discussion around if we are in a position where we can present a new model code to you, or if we get to a decision when we go, you know what, actually, OLG is going to take a little bit too long to come out with this. Let's just re-look at our own code as it stands right now and go out to public consultation anyway. We're really keen to get some of your advice tonight so that we can go, okay, what does that actually look like and how can we frame that up? In terms of the public forums, I think we've already had a bit of a discussion around that. We were proposing in the paper that you won't get the paper now, possibly, but what we were going to propose was actually a separate guideline in relation to public forums so that we could allow us a little bit of flex depending on when and the number of of community submissions that we had and when we felt like we needed to have that public forum as well. In terms of the meeting schedule and structure and schedule, the sentiment that we got from a number of you that the committee meetings probably aren't working as we need. You like the EIT session, so that was something that we might bolster. But actually the council meeting themselves present an opportunity for us to have these type of presentations anyway. So is it something that just in the nature of our council meetings, we look at that? And obviously an update to the meeting schedule and discussion around public forums. So there were 5 options that were presented to you. The first couple really speak to 2 council meetings being held on the first and third Monday of each month, and that public forum being held on the Thursday prior to the meeting. The agenda, and Councillor Hudson, who's not here tonight, was really interested in when that agenda would get presented. The way that that's working at the moment, because it comes out on a Tuesday, the feeling from a community is it's not providing them enough time. And I think the likes of yourselves have also stated that it's not providing you enough time to review papers ahead of that public forum. But any feedback on that as an option?
Thank you. So one of the reasons we don't have enough timing is because we took out the briefing sessions. They're not included in these suggestions because it was only reversed last week. And I get that. So my suggestion, because I've come up with 2 scenarios, was to put the briefing sessions back in there. In effect, that's why we created the committee meetings, because they were the closest we could get to a briefing session. And it's taken us a little while to morph into this format where we go into the committee of the whole and we're able to have our discussion. If you have things in the briefing sessions, it sort of indicates to the community that there's an item coming up, possibly. And so then they're getting ready with their pens and paper and research to get ready to give us both barrels on something. And so they don't need quite as long to gather their information to create their presentation. And I understand, just like each of us have other lives and we really only part-time councillors, the people who want to make the submissions, they're all working or they're all busy with their community groups. And so they've got to have time to make their presentation. And I get that. I think, though, if we had went back to having briefing sessions, that would then take out the issue of not having enough time. And I also think we wouldn't have to have them on the Thursday night, because we could have them the week prior or the council meeting prior. So if we were having something discussed on the 21st of September, if we knew there was going to be something coming to that council meeting, if it was part of a presentation on either the 7th or the 14th, then particularly the 7th, the community would be able to present on the 14th if we had another meeting that night. And therefore we'd have time to be able to take that on board before we're making our decisions. So we're sort of leapfrogging all the time. We have the briefing session. There's no reason why the community couldn't make a presentation prior to the briefing sessions on something that's in the briefing session as well, because we're making the briefing session agenda available to the community at the moment. So
But under this current 2025, which is being rescinded, we can't have public briefing sessions. So how do you overcome that? We're talking about the current model, not the old model.
But we're probably going back to the...
So are we talking about how that applies to now, or what it looks for the future, or are we going back to 2021? Is this like Back to the Future, or?
Yeah,
I'm a bit
talking about a Back to
confused.
the Future model, yeah.
That being said, we're in a position where a new code will come out. And so reflecting on your comments, Councillor Glacken, there's probably two things. One is that with the new code of meeting practice, I think we would still anticipate that they would not be leaning favourably towards shying away from the kind of open committee meetings that we've been having now. I don't know that we would be in a long-term position that those pre-meeting briefing sessions would apply. So to your point, Mayor Mack, I think it's seeking feedback right now, but I think you could assume that pre-meeting briefing sessions would not prevail for particularly long. The other thing in relation to this, Councillor Glacken, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, is we have seen community interest go through the roof. And so we've had a number of items that more and more people are willing and wanting to present on, which is wonderful. It also means that the length of our community, council meetings has grown exponentially. And further to that, it doesn't allow time for councillors to pause, reflect, get other information from staff, and then make an informed decision from that point. And so I just query separating the public forum out from the council meeting. I wonder whether there's broader benefit in that ongoing.
No, I just, if we have our meetings on the Monday, if you move to Tuesday, have them on the Tuesday, but we have them on the Monday night because all councillors can get into that routine of that's the day.
Sorry, Mayor Mack. There's a couple of options here where we look at the meetings every 3 weeks or the 2 meetings that are reflected here where we say, why don't we move it to a Tuesday and have a look at that? Because that then means that with papers coming out on a Thursday afternoon, it gives community the weekend to your, true and correct point. Community members need some time to reflect, and a lot of them are working throughout the week, so it just gives them those sort of extra days to do that. So a public forum being held on the Monday with the view that there's a council meeting on the Tuesday, would that be something? No? All on the...
Councillor King.
Yeah, I think the Monday routine was really good, and perhaps maybe the business papers need to be presented earlier for community rather than us rescheduling routines and bringing us back on a Monday, then a Tuesday, possibly a Thursday, as has been pointed out. It's largely voluntary as councillors, and there's a lot of reading required. And I did think the Monday worked quite well in my view, and perhaps if, depending on, the public forum could be on a Monday night leading into something that's coming up. But yeah, and whether at our end in terms of, I know it puts workload on everyone, but, if we've gone monthly meetings, we still managed to push right to the deadline to get the business papers done. Whereas when we had fortnightly meetings, well, geez, you could arguably say it was twice as much work in kind of getting that all up. So perhaps, if from a organisational perspective, it's put up at an earlier time frame for the community to look at. So rather than a Thursday, maybe it is a good week ahead, but that's just one perspective.
Mr. McGrath.
Mr. Mayor, I think that as Gail has indicated, there are a few options here that were to be worked through. But I think one of the key objectives was to separate, and I know this recent announcement has thrown a spanner in the works, but one of the objectives was to separate the public forum conduct and guidelines out of the code of meeting practice. And if you do that, you take away some of the potential issues associated with the code of meeting practice and its restrictions, i.e. audio-visual attendance not being permitted. So you could effectively have the public forum on a night away from the council meeting, as has been suggested, and that addresses that principle that's been talked about about giving some time between public forum and council's more formal consideration of the business. but the councillors aren't compelled to be in attendance in the room. You could do it by audio visual link, for example. And the way things are heading as well, we think, and I can never preempt a decision in the Legislative Assembly in Sydney, the same as I would never preempt a decision in this chamber of the elected council, but we believe that there'll be a relaxation of the audio visual requirements as well in any updated code that does come as a result of these changes. So I think there's a recognition of the commitment that councillors need to make to attending the various meetings, and whatever can be done to try and ease that through audio visual attendance is something that we would focus on as well.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mayor Mac. I'm one of the few, I think, by the sound of this, that doesn't mind these committee meetings. I think they've been really good, and especially the presentations and things. And I'm also all for having the public forum away from the council meeting nights. I think it impacts on the decision making, and we don't need 12 o'clock council meetings either, marathons. I think we make better decisions when they're a bit shorter and sharper. And I haven't minded the way it's been tracking. Tonight, for example, this has been an excellent committee meeting. I know not everyone's here, but it's not much different to the pre-meeting briefing sessions, but we're doing it in public. There's this good debate, and it's the discussion is, because you're pushing a button and everything, it's a bit more orderly. So even though it's about to be rescinded, it hasn't been a bad thing in my view. And I've been here on, this was the old way of doing it back in the early 2000s. Then we went to the 2-meeting cycle, and I didn't think that worked that well. And this, in my book, works better than the 2 meetings a month.
Thank you. I do agree with you. Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you. In my observation, the old way of doing it, I didn't think it was broken. I didn't even see the need to fix it, to be honest. I enjoyed the pre-meeting briefing, and I think this is just, like you said, Stuart, a more formalised and orderly way of doing it. I think the marathoning has come about because we've got 1 meeting a month, and it's jamming a lot. And we've had a lot to deal with in this last year. There've been really big issues and contentious issues that the community want to be a part of that decision making. So I absolutely welcome public and community forums. I prefer it all on the Monday night, given that I have a young family with lots of sporting commitments, and I have another job as well. And so I've kind of, I know we're all adaptable, but yeah, I'd be happy with the Monday evenings. Thank you.
Councillor Gladkin.
Thank you. I'll ask a question. Did I not convey my, this is my question, did I not convey my thoughts on this sufficiently to say that in essence, I'm not asking that the public forums be on the night of the council meeting, but there be a separation, but it be another Monday, and perhaps, and I understand that the staff try really hard that when they send the information out for the council meeting, they have all the papers attached. However, if we got the paperwork out earlier, noting that some of the papers would be attached later, or there may even be draft versions of reports sent out, that it would enable the community to prepare themselves to make a presentation the 2 weeks prior, or if there is some way of retaining a format that's on a Monday night, one Monday night, a committee meeting, pre-briefing session, training, information type meeting that people don't have to attend because they can do it remotely as well, then presentations could be made prior to that because they're not a decision-making meeting. So I think there's all sorts of opportunity once we find out what the government decides we're going to do, or we're going to have thrust upon us next time. I think there's all sorts of options, but I think what I'm hearing is the Monday night is the preference for most people. And, you know, most of us are happy to lock away every Monday night type of thing, or 4 of the 5 Monday nights, cancelling a Monday night as we used to do. If we still do on occasion, if we don't need that Monday night, we then cancel the Monday night. Did I not explain that sufficiently? That's my question.
Mr. McGrath?
Yeah, look, you have explained it very clearly now, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of points. Just a couple of points. Look, I think there is a lot of unknowns at the moment, and what happened last week has contributed to that. So we did think going ahead with this is probably an opportune time to get some feedback, but without having a firm direction from the OLG, it is a bit challenging. In response to a couple of issues, having the public forum on the Monday prior would mean having the business paper out probably at least mid the Wednesday or Thursday of the week before that. That's already been explained recently that that's problematic in the context of getting all the business lined up for the agenda, etc. So that's number one. I would never recommend or suggest that the staff issue draft reports because if it changed, why did it change? You know, what's going on? Look, there's some rigor, a lot of rigor that goes into this, and we try and make sure that the right information is in the councillors and the community's hands to enable quality decision making. And I think that would just cast doubt on the whole process. I would never support that. But look, I think the message is clear. We need to get some further information from the OLG. At the very least, you can expect a report at the June meeting rescinding and going back to the old, and then we'll need to work it through from there.
To that point, Mr. CEO, I think an EIT might be an appropriate opportunity to discuss this in full, the whys for and against, and where we can come up with some solution about what that looks like moving forward. For the proposed changes to the existing, now we're reverting back to the old is the old, and we will stick to that until the minister decides what's going to happen, but it's beyond our remit. But I think we need to get this stuff sorted, and I think I agree with Councillor Baker that I think this works. I just think it needs a little bit of finessing. Councillor Bullivant.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Mac. Just reiterating the interim CEO's words that he has a phone conference tomorrow. Then he'll have some more information about the procedure that we've got to and the course that we've got to take as an organisation. So I suspect we should just let it lay until the CEO gives us direction about which way we're heading.
Thank you. Councillor Callaghan.
Just for confirmation, because it's been a little while, so we'll go back to 2, given that things could change, but the rescinding would look like 2 meetings with the public community forums before that Monday night meeting.
Yeah. Potentially, but
Yeah.
subject to feedback.
Yeah, thanks.
Pre-meeting briefing sessions, yeah, they will make their comeback. Yeah. I hear Johnny Farnham's not making another comeback, but they definitely will. Okay, right, we're done. Thank you, Miss Evans-Barth, for that moment of confusion. No, seriously, thank you. It was very good feedback. Okay, now I need a meeting to move back into the BG and C committee. Councillor Glacken.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that we move back from the committee of the whole into the B, G and C committee.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Happy to second.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. We have no officer reports for consideration, no officer reports for noting. Do we have any notice of urgent business, councillors? No? Okay. BGC 1-3, Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. I'd like to move that we move into confidential with reference to Local Government Act 1993, number 30, section 10A2, which is a confidential item exclusive to press and public on the grounds that the matter relates to A, personnel matters concerning particular individuals other than councillors, and D, commercial information of a confidential nature that would, if disclosed, 1, prejudice the commercial position of the person who supplied it, or 3, reveal a trade secret. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Callaghan.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Are there anyone in the chamber that has any statements, submissions regarding the reasons identified for the confidential item? There have been no submissions received. I will put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Okay, toilet break.
That's tomorrow.